Welcome. This is For Better and Worth,
the podcast where we don't believe you have to sacrifice your relationship while you build your net worth.
We are your hosts.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Ericka Young. And we're so glad you joined us today.
All right, y'all, come on. Let's get into it. Hello, folks. We are back at it again.
Yes, at the table. So we've got some great stuff to talk about today, and I'm excited because it's something different, and it was spurred by a conversation that I had recently with someone, and I think that it's going to really be helpful. It was helpful for me when I had that conversation.
Yeah, I think, as we sit and we try and figure out what is the best thing to bring to the airwaves, we really think about what, will benefit people and hearing it. And we try and pull from our experience and what we have learned and what we've shared and what we've experienced. Because I think when you can pull from your real life experience and apply it to the real world, it kind of grounds us all because, we can't live in la-la and fairyland. So
That's right. So we talk about marriage and money, couples and money. And I think that because we've been doing this for a while now, it is important for us to get back to a very basic fundamental of why it's so challenging for people who are partnered up, who are coupled up to talk about money. I'll be really honest and say, and I'm sort of putting my daughter on blast here, but yesterday I asked her a question. She's in college, and I asked her about her budget. She had told me about a week ago that she had created a budget, and she was excited about it at that time. And then when I wanted to talk about it with her, she was not interested. And money is funny. There are moments where you want to discuss it, and then there are moments where you're like, not right now. Give me a second. The circumstances have changed, or I'm in front of people. I don't want to talk about this, or, I feel weird because I just realized something new. And so it dawned on me that it really does take courage to have a money conversation. And that wasn't ever really something that I had in all of the years that you and I have, talked money or, with clients. It just honestly kind of hit me recently that is a courageous move.
yeah, it's interesting when we were talking about this. It's interesting, how we call it courageous because I tend to think that it requires a level of vulnerability. And in that vulnerability, that's where the courage kicks in. Because when you talk about money, you either have enough of it or you don't have enough of it, or you're managing it well, or you're having challenge with it. And I find it interesting, I was sitting there with you when you asked about, the budget. And, she didn't seem to want to share right then.
Yeah.
But we know that she's one of those people that she has to be in the mood for things. And if she's not in the mood, it's like, okay, now's not a good time. But then just as that conversation went on, it was like, well, we've been dining out a little more the last week and a half. And the circumstance seriously could have shifted.
Mm-hmm.
But money conversations, whether it's especially in a couple relationship, I think sometimes they get everybody on edge.
Mm-hmm.
Because if, like we've talked about in the past, if you have an income earner that makes more than the other one, then that can sometimes make, the lower wage earner feel like, well, dang, I'm not bringing enough, or they're going to tell me what I can and can't do. And it brings all this anxiety. So to have a conversation that can be meaningful, it really does take courage, because I think sometimes you got to be willing to set a lot of things aside
Mm-hmm.
to get to the heart of the matter. So,
Yeah.
We're going to ask you all as you listen today, put your courageous ears on, be like, like the lion in the Wiz, put them up.
Oh my gosh. So, you know what? I think what is a good exercise is to figure out what your own hot buttons are around money. What are the things that you do not want to talk about and why? And I think that's a self inventory. To
Yeah.
start with, what do you shy away from? What are you afraid to say? What do you wish was different? What are you like? I hear these words, guilt and shame, a lot around money. And so, what do you feel guilty about? What have you done in your past that you are ashamed of? And you don't have to tell anybody that, but maybe write it down. Maybe just think about it. Answer those questions. What is the hot button? What is the trigger that would get you just fired up or to retreat? Or, that's the thing. That's the untouchable area, because that addressing it in some way so that you can conquer it is what takes courage, right? That's the moment where you are being brave. And I will be very honest and say I've had a couple of hot points, right? One, I don't enjoy spending money. So when we
That is so funny because we keep Amazon and
listen, you know what?
UPS in
How
this.
about you mind your business? Okay.
Oh, my bad. My bad. I wasn't supposed to say that, but you talking about you don't like spending money.
No. Okay, so let me clarify.
Boy, if we get packages here, 99% of them don't have my name on it.
Okay. And
I'm sorry. Back,
you know what?
Back to the regularly
I'm
scheduled
about
program.
to pull your number too. Okay, right here on the air. No, but I don't enjoy spending large amounts of money. Let's be clear.
There we go.
$20, $30, $50. That doesn't bother me.
All right. There we go.
It is the big. It is the car purchase. I would even venture to say, like, when it requires more of me, of my time, like switching phones, like that may not be.
I was just about to say that.
That might not be, a huge sum of money, but I don't enjoy it. I don't want to.
iPhone 15, here we come.
Oh my gosh, no, not me. Anyway, Samsung for life. Come on. Anyway, but like a house, a car, our daughter's college education, right?
Yeah.
When we're making thousands of dollar purchases.
So basically, big items, big ticket items give you
and
anxiety.
I have noticed that I will shy away from that conversation until I feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's true.
you have said, well, what kind of car do you want next? I'm like, dude, I'm not even thinking about that because I know that is at least a $30,000 purchase. I'm not here for it. I don't care. Like, I don't want to have that.
Girl, you getting a Civic. You getting a Honda Accord.
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
Maybe. No, but I feel like it is a bigger conversation. And so I shy away from it. And I find myself not wanting to go there. We already talked about some episodes back, like you wanting to go buy another house and how that turned out to be, a whole conversation.
Oh, Lord.
And the renovation of the house. Like, when we have these big money moments, I'm like, and not just overnight, like I need some time. And so I get anxious about spending larger sums of money. Whereas for you, I think that that's different. I've also gotten anxious about income disparity, right? So like early in our relationship, I make more money and now you make more money. And it's like, I work hard. And so I don't enjoy talking about that piece because that also brings up feelings of goodness. Don't I work hard enough? I should get paid fairly for what, you know what I mean? And so that also brings it up. And I think finding those hot buttons will help people to understand what is required to maybe elevate and or figure out what about that issue needs to rise to the occasion. What makes it worth having that conversation? Because I think a lot of times we just shy away from it and we just don't want to deal with it and we sweep it under the rug. And that's not helpful either.
Yeah, I guess it does take courage when you put it in that perspective because there's a discomfort for you in those areas. And so like me, me being your husband, I think about it like, okay, she's not real comfortable with these types of conversations, so I need to give her some space and some latitude. And I think that's where, as we talk about relationships, that's where you have to know your partner. And you have to understand that, okay, here's a space where they don't feel comfortable. They get anxiety about it. And it will take some courage for them to step forward and fully engage in the conversation. And knowing that, it allows me to say, okay, well, let me give her some space. Let me give her some time to process through this. Then we can get to the meat of it and have a meaningful conversation. So, it's two-way. It's you identifying where your anxieties lie that will require you to be courageous to have that conversation. And on the other side, the partner understanding what those things are and giving you that latitude and space. And so, like, I think about myself, or, well, you want to say something before I go
I
there?
was just gonna ask, I mean, do you have places where you feel like you've had to exercise a bit of courage in order to get through that particular conversation?
Well, yeah. Well, that's a perfect setup because I always think about what will require me to have courage is if I felt like I've made a mistake. Like I try and be very, diligent in my decision making, and I try to, hit home runs, or at least, get on base, And sometimes you might hit a strike, or
Mhm.
you might hit some fouls, then those fouls lead to strikes, and then you start thinking like, man, I've messed up. I made an
Mm.
error. You struck out and you didn't hit the home run or you didn't get on base. And so for me, when I think I've made a financial, boo boo, it's like, okay, we got to talk about this because I even go back and
Yeah.
I think about, we own several homes, and I think our first home we bought, we were young, and how they say young and dumb. We bought this house and we built it and lived in that house for like 6 or 7 years, and it was a great house, and we made progress. Had got a 15-year mortgage, so we were doing the smart things. But then when it came time to sell, I don't know if we got greedy or if we were just naive.
I think both, but more greed than
Right,
naivety.
right,
I mean, it comes with the territory, having never sold a home, that there are things you don't know, but I also think
yes,
greed won out.
yes, because we were in Arizona in the days when we bought a house for low, and the house almost 2.5 times the value, and we literally put it up for 2.5 times what we paid for it. And it was slow, but that was before the 2008 housing market crash. It was a couple years before that, and we should have just price adjusted and sold the home. But we were like, well, you know what, we're not dropping the price, and we are going to become landlords.
Mhm.
And we had talked about it, and I think digging into my history and knowing that my father was a landlord, I was like, yeah, I want to try and do this. Man, why did we end up being landlords for 12 years?
Yeah, and it has so many regrets. Like that was the one word. If there were a place in our financial lives that we wish we had done something different, it was with that house, right? In terms of having sold it earlier than we did, and because we had to wait, we had to wait for
Yeah.
the market to recover, so we had much regret. And I think there were times, plenty of times throughout the course of those 12 years, where one of us was like, I just can't even talk about this right now. I don't even feel like talking right there. Don't
Oh
talk to
my
me.
God.
This is,
Yeah.
I don't even want to hear it. Like you would come back and say the tenant did such and such, or we got to fix this, or something happened, and we're like, oh my gosh, not today. I just don't want to talk about it
Yeah.
today.
I think that's what has given me anxiety, and that's what really took courage, because it was courage, but before I even got to the courageous part, it was like, let me get into the reality part of it. I am where I am. The situation is what it is. So I had to ground myself in reality. And then once I was able to ground myself in reality, I was like, okay, let me figure out how we chart a way forward. We chart a path forward. And I think a lot of people who are listening to this, you may be at that point where you've made some financial mistakes or some mishaps, and you feel like, oh my God, I don't want to address this. I don't want to talk about it. Let me just sweep it under the rug. That's almost the worst thing you could do.
Hmm.
It's like, get yourself to a point where you can ground yourself in reality and say, okay, here is what the situation is. Is it optimal? No. Is it the end of my life? No. Is it the end of the world? No. Can this be rectified? Yes. And then begin to work forward, because I think once we got to the point where we realize we are where we are and we need to figure out how to make it work, we just kept tenants in the house.
Yeah.
And in the course of those years, we ourselves only paid the mortgage like a handful of times ourselves, and some of those were like towards the end when we
Mhm.
were, fixing it up and preparing it for sale. So I think that helped us get to a
Mhm.
point where we could say, okay, we made this bad financial decision that we really didn't want to talk about. We weren't dealing in reality, and we certainly weren't being courageous. But once we got, to a point where we were realistic of what the circumstance was, then we could enter that courageous phase and say, okay, let's talk about this. And I don't know how you remember it, but this was like, boy, it used to give me anxiety.
Yeah, I do remember. And I feel like we had to respect one another's place, just like you had mentioned earlier. And the biggest thing is that we had to be honest with ourselves. We had to be honest with ourselves about cutting our losses at a certain point. And honestly, it took courage to make a decision. When we finally decided to sell the house and how we were going to do it, and the repairs or updates that needed to be made in order for that home to be ready. So we had to invest a bit of money in order for that to occur. It took courage to face it and deal with
Yeah,
it because we kicked the can down the road quite a bit. Like we avoided that quite a bit. And when I look back, I feel like we did what we had to do at the time, but honestly, it was really kicking the can. It was like I don't feel like dealing with this, so I'm not. And then when we finally fessed up and said, "All right, well, okay, I think we put in about $5,000 into the house to like get it ready for sale." We made that decision, and then we made the decision to put it on the market, and we made the decision to wait until it sold. Those steps freed us. And if we had done it sooner or at a different time or 12 years and just, change the price, that would have been great. But it took courage to make a decision. Like in the end, the decision was what was hard.
yeah. I know it was more than 5,000 that we had to put into it. So
Okay, I'm being
let me
optimistic.
just
But
clarify
I'm
because
talking about at the end,
I
husband.
know, I know. I'm saying at the end it was more than that. So we had to just say, okay, let's chalk it up. And fortunately for us, we were able to recoup what we had to put out, and we made a little bit of money
Tiny bit of money.
on the backside. But
Hmm.
still, the whole point is that when you get to these situations, you got to just kind of step up to the plate and say, you know what, I should have just been like, let me put my big boy pants on and go ahead and just deal with this, little mistake, the little accident I made along the way.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the biggest thing I could tell people today is like, look, start the conversation and deal with it, and just because it is a hard thing to deal with, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. You can't make what they say, lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah,
So
it's possible.
yeah, it's very much so possible, and so it just requires people to, step forward. So
I think it's good to also consider what are the hard money conversations to have. So for us, it was, you know, owning up to a mistake that we made, something that we regretted and then dealing with that moving forward. But I think a lot of times people, you mentioned income disparity, sometimes that is a difficult conversation for people to have and letting go of, what we once thought was going to be. Like one of the things recently was, our daughter had this dream of going to a specific school and it was super expensive. And the hardest conversation that I have had with my child around finances is that it doesn't make sense to send you to that school because it's completely out of pocket and it's out of state. And that was so hard. There were tears involved. There was so much emotion because you want to give your kids everything. And that was just
yes,
something that we couldn't saddle her with the debt on. And I also didn't want us to, you know, do all of the things that it will be required to allow her to make that choice. And so that was a very, very difficult money conversation. And it wasn't all our decision, right? Like she needed to be a part of that whole process. What other money conversations do you feel like people might have that are difficult and they need to face that take a bit of courage?
Well, before I even jump into that, I think just building off that college example, it took courage for us to say this wasn't the smart thing to do.
Right. As a parent.
Right. But then it turned out that she went where she was wanted, where
Hmm.
people pursued her, and she ended up getting, full ride scholarships. And she's in a place where she's really excited, and the program for her is more appropriate at this school versus the other school. And so I stopped there because sometimes you can't see the blessing inside of that decision. And if we had not, been courageous to say, okay, this isn't the right thing to do, maybe we need to look at other options, she couldn't have received that blessing on the backside.
Yeah, we stood in our value principle. We value a free college education, or we also value not having college debt. And so we had to stand in that. And that, with our daughter, we had to stand in that with her and say, gosh, this is difficult, but we are going to be courageous enough, brave enough to say that our value system stands here. And this means that this is a different decision. Now, thank God he took care of her, right? And
Absolutely.
she
But
had all of those
but
things.
that's what happens. That's what happens when you're in the midst of, a difficult money conversation. Because let's be honest, when people are talking about money, especially in relationships, we talk about income disparities. That's one thing. But then we talk about, like you got somebody who's a spender, somebody who's a saver, somebody who wants to use credit cards, and somebody who doesn't. And all of that stuff requires you to just, be invested and have conversation, because then you never know what's on the backside of that. And I think that example with our daughter is just one of those examples to show that this is where you wanted to go, this is where you ended up going, and here is the blessing on the backside of it. Because you asked me what other areas do I think people have big money conversations on. I think whenever, like, you talk about big purchases, how they give you anxiety, I think there is always in a couple relationship someone who is more willing to go off and spend big on something all the time. Every relationship has somebody. It could be, oh, I want a new car every couple years, or I want the latest, greatest tech, or I want, the biggest, baddest vacation. And whenever you're talking about spending money, I said this statement earlier today. It's easy to talk about spending money when you have enough of it. But it's difficult sometimes when you don't have enough of it.
So, do you think that money conversations are always more challenging when you don't think you have enough?
I think that, well, naturally, I say yes. I
Mhm.
do think they are most challenging when people feel like they don't have enough. Because if you have discretionary money and discretionary funds, and all your bills are met, your retirement is fully funded, you don't have any debts, sure, that's easy. It's easier,
Hmm.
right?
In some
Because
ways, navigating is easier, but I will also say sometimes more money, more problems, right?
that's
You
true.
have more
That's
responsibility.
true.
You might, you are held, you know, there's a higher place that you have to go with how you deal with money because there's more of it, right? So you're held at a higher
That's
accountability
true.
with the government. You got to pay them more money. Let's start there, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're a giver, that might mean more money that you're giving, or there might be people who look at you and say, "Oh, I want some of your money," right? Like
Yeah,
I
I
think.
think those are external problems though.
Mhm.
Because what we're talking about really, at the For Better and Worth podcast, where we talk about relationships and money, what we're talking about is those issues with inside a relationship and the financial things that come along with that. That's what I
Mhm.
think in this particular
Right.
example we're talking about. So I think more money, more problems, but from a relationship perspective, I don't know. This just maybe it's just my point of view. You got more money, it's like, okay, well, do what you want to do. We're good. But if you are talking about where issues can come up, I think if you're talking about going and buying, a new Tahoe or a
Well, and
new
and
pickup truck, a $75,000 truck, it's like, well, hold on now. Do we need a $75,000
That's
truck?
why I'm saying though, more money, more problems, because you have actually more decisions that you can make. When you have a limited income, then you actually have less decisions that you can make because you don't have access to a $70,000 vehicle when you don't have as much money to be able to afford it, right? So sometimes,
And now, Erica,
what?
you do this for a living.
You're correct.
You know that people out there go out and extend themselves to the hilt.
If they are given the credit.
Yes, that's true.
If they are given access to it. So I think it could go both ways. I honestly think that what I have found is that when you don't have a whole lot of money, you worry about it in a different way, right? You worry about making ends meet, etc. When you have a lot of money, you probably worry about what the heck you're gonna do with it all,
Think about
right?
how to make more money.
And you can fuss about who gets to do what because you have so much, right? And then you might have, like I said, people coming and who are trying to get stuff from you, right? There's more of a demand. So I think it can go both ways. And I think that put it like this. No one is immune. Everybody can identify a challenge that they have in talking about something surrounding money.
Yes.
So it could be the aging process and spending on medical bills or retirement community. It could be,
Or we had a friend that we were talking to, and they are pretty well off. They're well to do and retired early, and they were talking about like, well, are we living on too much?
mhm.
Like, do we really need to be living in this big house, or do we really need to be taking this because they have the heart to be givers, and they have a passion for people, and so that was a whole different kind of
Yeah.
thing to talk about. So look at us hashing out these issues for the people.
And I think it's important though that people realize that you have to dig deep to have a conversation that's challenging, right? You have to dig deep to figure out what's really going on. Sometimes it's just simply how do we stop spending so much so we can live? Most of the time, people have enough. And
Yeah.
how do we stop spending so that we can actually realize that?
We need to, in this country, embrace more of the minimalist
Yeah.
attitude,
Yeah.
which that is not very pervasive because
Mm-mm.
I was getting dressed this morning. I was like, man, I don't have nothing to wear. And I was looking, I was like, I've got all these polos in this section. I got all these shirts in this section. I got clothes I can't hang up.
And I just bought you 2 shirts, honey.
Right. And I was like, those shirts were sitting with the other 2 shirts I recently bought. And I was like, you are beside yourself talking about you don't have. I got 4 new shirts right here.
You are the epitome of more money, more problems because you have more choices. When you have more choices, that makes it more challenging.
Look, God is good.
Oh my goodness. Here he goes. You
Well-
know what? You are hilarious. But I think that it can be hard to really overcome. And I want people to really understand that we have been talking for months about money and relationships and digging deep, getting vulnerable, as you stated in the very beginning,
Mm-hmm.
is courageous. It takes bravery. And it is something that your kids can look up to, your friends can look up to. It is important that you know that there is strength in having a conversation that ain't easy, and being honest and being, willing to share something that is really near and dear to your heart. And I think that that's real. That's real.
I think as we talk about the difficulty around money conversations, I think we also have to talk about how you can make those easier.
Yes.
Because I really think that though the conversations are difficult, they are not impossible.
Exactly.
And because they are not impossible, you can make them easier.
And most of the time when they're difficult, they're necessary conversations.
Right. And I firmly believe that, like we've talked about it, in previous episodes, you got to set some ground rules, in these conversations because like I know you and I know you need some space to let things marinate when we're talking about big items or big decisions that we're going to make, together. And so I know if I give you that space, then you can come to the conversation more level-headed, more clear-headed, and we can really make progress towards whatever decision it is that we're trying to make. But if I press the issue, like, no, we need to talk about this. This has been on my mind. I want to flush it out. The conversation typically does not go in a very positive way because you feel pressured. You don't feel like I've heard you and I've given you the appropriate space to process. And that's not good for the relationship. So in setting the ground rules, I think the first thing you have to do is understand how your partner, your financial other
Uh-huh.
operates, and give them the time or the space so that they can come and be courageous to either agree, disagree, because sometimes it might be good to have some disagreement because I personally believe that disagreement it forces you to press pause sometimes.
Mhm.
And in pressing pause, you reassess or
Mhm.
reevaluate. And sometimes that reevaluation is enough to get a totally different outcome.
Yeah. I would say too that especially since we know that we care for this person. They are our partner in crime, the one that we will ride or die for. I think that is a really important thing is to know them well. But I think for some of those difficult conversations, and I'm gonna say one big one is when there's debt that has been hidden, and that needs to come to the forefront, or spending in a certain area has gotten out of control and you haven't discussed that, and it's contrary to the goals that you have set, or it is hindering you from being able to do something that is really important. And I think one of the biggest things is to simply acknowledge that this is going to take courage and vulnerability. Just to say, I know that this is hard, but I'm here with you. And when you're ready to share, I'm ready. As well as I know that this takes courage. Like to
Hmm.
just say that, because what that does is that empowers that person to say, okay, you know what? I think they get it a little bit. Even though you might feel vulnerable, exposed, it's challenging. That doesn't mean that you're not in it together. So I think behaving as a team to make sure that you set the stage for that conversation is huge, especially when it is something of that nature where it's debt that has been hidden, like I said, or spending that has been covered, and it is detracting from your goal. And you and I haven't had that actually happen in our relationship, but I have worked with plenty of people where that was the case, and they always felt like they would be judged by their partner. And so if you can set the stage and say, I'm not here to judge you. I just want to make sure that we can move forward together as a team. And you say it literally and let them know, I understand that it takes some courage. I'm ready for it. When you are, that goes a long way to
That's
just face it.
that's good. That's real good because you're putting yourself aside and you're thinking
Mhm.
about the other half of the equation. So
Mhm.
so it sounds like we were already getting into the make it worth it. So
Yeah.
we don't have to repeat all of that because you guys can just you know go back 30 seconds and you can hear it all. But what would you say, is in addition to all of that, what's one good make it worth it?
I would honestly say simply that a challenging conversation is only challenging if we make it so. Let's make every conversation courageous, by just facing it head on and finding ways to do that. So, we don't have to run away from hard conversations.
Right.
Let's just make it a courageous conversation.
Look, I'm gonna keep it real simple. Like the people at Nike said, just
Uh-oh.
do it. And literally just do it. Don't keep kicking the can down the road like we did with our house. Just decide, hey, if you need some time or some space, set a date, set a
Mhm.
time, but just do it.
Mhm.
Have the conversation, be bold, take that step out, and just talk about it because that weight will be lifted off your shoulders when you talk about it, discuss it, and you got this other person that has a different point of view, different perspective, and that's always good. The yin to your yang, the Batman to your Robin. So, just go and do it. And so with that, we want you all to just keep, pressing play, hearing what we're saying. We hope you're taking away from this. And until next time,
We're out.
thank you for spending some of your time with us today.
We appreciate all your support. So be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to this podcast.
You can find us on Instagram at For Better and Worth.
And sign up for our email on forbetterandworth.com.
Till next time, we're out of here.